Thank you. That was actually in honor of our next speaker who has some Scottish roots. So we have a couple things to take care of. First of all, we have the best technology available on the planet. Of course, technology always allows us to get everything done more quickly and efficiently. And in this case, technology is also allowing us to get delayed more quickly and efficiently. So that's what we're dealing with. We have a warning about tomorrow morning. The lectures will be in the Kiva building, which is that away, which is north of here. And there will be signs out, but the registration and exhibits will be staying here during the morning hours. So tomorrow morning, and we are going to do our best to start promptly at 8 o'clock, and that's going to be just a few paces north of here. And I'm going to have to take account of that too. Another thing, I want to remind you, if you order your DVDs today or tomorrow, they are $100 off. And we also have plenty of back issues of the Extraordinary Technology and Exotic Research magazines. The Exotic Research magazines are on clearance, $2 each. And several people have asked about the social. That is not at the hotel, that's here. And it'll be right after the Brooks Agnew lecture. The food's here, so there's plenty, and it looks like that's pretty well set up. And you'll get to hear a little harp music for that if you want. This is such a nice big area that if you like to be around the harp, you can, and if you don't, you can be somewhere else and still be part of it. Okay, our presenter for this evening's session is Brooks Agnew. I like the way he describes himself as a commercial scientist, because we need those as much as we need the other types as well. So he's been working for a long, long time. He spent 29 years in the auto industry. He worked a lot on high-speed design and high-speed manufacturing design, And for the past 2 years, he's been an engineer for Green Star, which is a company that makes biodiesel plants. He's just finishing one up in Odessa, Washington right now. And he's going to be doing a few more. Matter of fact, it looks like we're going to need a whole lot of biodiesel plants pretty quick here. So it looks like he's got himself into a long-term job. But his real interest is working with a lot of amazing historical information. He's an author of a book called The Arc of Millions of Years, which is in 3 volumes, which you can get here. And he's also the host of X Squared Radio. Let's please welcome Brooks Agnew.
Yes. Oh, that's much better. I was going to say it's dangerous to play an Irish jig with a Scot in the room. Almost found myself. Almost found myself dancing back there. I have a little tradition of my own. Because you get to see me for the next 70 minutes, I want to be able to look back at my book and see you. So I'm going to take a picture of you. Besides, sometimes I pick up the strangest things above your heads. Oh, that's nice. Very nice. Thank you very much. All right, well, it's interesting that I get a chance to speak at TeslaTech. My boss, in 1978, at the 100th anniversary of Nikola Tesla coming to this country, was at the celebration at a Tesla convention with Olaf Johnson. And, well, needless to say, it was a heck of a party for about 4 days. People that gravitate to this technology, that understand that there are ways to tap into the power of a planet, the power of a galaxy, even the power of a universe, and deliver it with virtually no cost to the general public, I think is what it's all about, right? Okay. I don't know what you know about hollow earth theory. About 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about it, except somebody handed me a book called Our Hollow Earth. And I read it and I set it aside. That was way back in 2001. And I thought, this is really nuts. Everyone knows that the earth is flat. I mean that the earth is solid. So piece by piece, the evidence started falling together as we put satellites out into space, as we tied our USGS listening stations together around the world. And what unfolded was what you're about to see. This is probably the most comprehensive explanation on hollow earth theory in the world today. And we're going to try and go through it. This artwork was done by our book artist, Roy Young. He's truly an inspired soul. And so we made it the cover of this presentation. This is my first at this. Oh, that works nice. Okay, I've had quite a few jobs beside being an engineer for the automotive industry. I have been pressing this left button and nothing is happening. Do I aim it? Oh, there you go. I've been a teacher. I've been a scientist, and as a commercial scientist as opposed to an academic scientist, although I have taught on the university level, I solve problems for industry. So by commercial, it means that all of my papers and patents and everything belong to someone else because they paid for them. Of course, an engineer, talk show host of X Squared Radio. It is a webcast radio program, but this year we became the fastest growing talk radio program in North America. And that includes faster growing than Coast to Coast, even though they have more radio stations. And my real claim to fame, though, my real dream is to be an Earth explorer. And I have to tell you that I'm living my dream right now. This is what I love doing. My family comes from Scotland, as I said. This is just outside of the city of Stranraer in Scotland. It overlooks Agnew Bay, which is next to the house on Agnew Crescent, which overlooks Agnew Park, so you get the idea that I'm in the right neighborhood. We came from Ireland in the year 695. This castle was built in 1319, had a small mishap in the kitchen, and was rebuilt in 1426. The Agnew clan and the Ross clan, very close to each other. And this is Rosslyn Chapel. Rosslyn is about 40 miles to the east of Stranraer. Stranraer sits right on the coast. The two clans cross-married for centuries. I know you know who Robert the Bruce is because you saw the movie. Well, he had a son called Edward the Bruce, and Edward the Bruce and Sir Andrew Agnew were the closest of friends and shared families for a long, long time. So we were kind of responsible for keeping this castle from being plundered for 350 years. That's my co-author next to me, E.J. Clark. So we're going to talk a little bit about a very special voyage. My great-great-grandfather on my grandmother Ross's side is Sir James Ross, and he discovered the North Magnetic Pole. So this is kind of deja vu for me. Who is it that I aim this at in the audience to get it to work? Oh, there we go. 3 books. We have Volume 1, Volume 2, and Volume 3, all of which are here. It covers from the creation of the Earth all the way through the 2012 events to the end of the age, the beginning of the age of Aquarius. And we cover aspects archaeological, historical, and religious, of course, and definitely scientific. We plug in the most modern physics into these books so that you could be brought up to date on things like laser interferometer gravitational wave observation. Yes, so you can impress your friends. What is hollow earth theory? I'm at a loss because you can see it and I can't, so I'm going to be constantly turning around to look at that. Well, we have a lot of data that comes from various places. We have space-based data like satellite photography and experiments that we run in space. And we also have Earth-based data. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. We have evidence in the sea, we have evidence in the sky, we have evidence on the ice, we have evidence even from inside the Earth, and we also have evidence from human consciousness itself. And we're going to cover all of this tonight. So let's talk a little bit about the evidence from space. It doesn't take very long. out stargazing, you're going to see satellites going around the planet. A lot of these are polar satellites. They go over the North and South Poles on a regular basis. But we do not see photographs above or below the 60th parallel, either on the south or north of the planet. We don't really know why that is, but in February of 2006, they passed the Data Denial Act. And the Data Denial Act says that in times of conflict or war, the NOAA can refuse to give data to the public from these satellites. And unfortunately, right now, there are no publicly available images of the North Pole. Every single photograph going all the way back to 1968 is covered with clouds. So there has to be a way. And there was in 1926 a man named Admiral Byrd, an aviation hero, because he flew at 2,500 feet across the North Pole and lived to tell about it. He records in his memoirs that while flying across the frozen tundra of the North Pole, he unexpectedly flew into a lush and green area with large woolly animals and flowing water where none should have been. That's all we have from that expedition. That and several quotations from him that possibly he was going to go back up there and take an expedition there, and that it would be the greatest expedition in the history of the world. We're here to carry that legacy on. From space, the aurora borealis looks kind of like a blurry green light. You can see the city lights blurred beneath this slide here. We also talk about expanding Earth theory. Is it okay if I walk around? You have a moving camera, right? I don't have to stand in one place all night because I kind of roam a little bit, so it's okay. I might roam out there where I can see this a little better. And what is expanding Earth theory? A lot of people want to know. Cosmologically, when we think about how planets form, we think about the Big Bang and maybe a lot of medium bangs after it. And these large clouds of dust, which we call accretion disks. And these disks begin spinning as they collapse. And the material in these accretion disks accumulates into planets. Of course, to conserve momentum, a lot like an ice skater pulling her arms in as she's spinning on the ice, they go faster and faster and faster in order to keep that same amount of energy in the system. So that's exactly what planets do. And they exhibit three different kinds of overspin. Overspin condition number one is they get to spinning too fast, they become unstable, and they explode. And they often become asteroid belts or chunks of debris flying out into the galaxy, not in orbit around anything. Overspin condition number two is that they reach an overspin condition where they just spit off a piece of themselves. And this is actually supposed to animate, so let me see if I can put my mouse on it, if I can find the mouse and click on it. Nope, I can't figure the mouse out. If I hit next, it's going to go to the next slide. This is supposed to spin, and then it will actually spit off a piece of itself. And this is, in fact, how Mercury came into existence. It was once a moon of Venus. It was too large, broke away from Venus's orbit, and assumed its own orbit around the sun. So that is where Mercury came from. So we have evidence of this in our own solar system. We don't have to go very far to find it. Then we have overspin condition number three, a little bit like Goldilocks porridge. It's exactly right. We find this gray area where planets overspin a little bit, but instead of flying apart, the crust merely cracks and then fills in with molten material. And then it cracks again and fills in with molten material. Of course, as the planet expands, it slows. As it slows, it begins cooling. And so you get conditions just right for life. And there we go. This idea was first put forth by a man named Roberto Mantovani in 1889, and also again in 1909. And what he did is, instead of thinking of Pangea, or Gondwana land, where all the continents are slid around on one side of our globe, the size it is now, he said, no, I don't think that's right. I think if you shrink the Earth, you actually get all the continents to fit together perfectly with no gaps in between them. Now, I'm not talking the shorelines that you see above the sea. I'm talking the continental shelves that are underneath the water right now. They fit together perfectly. With the exception of a few landslides and a couple dropouts, it's a perfect fit. So when you take this expanding Earth theory and go in reverse, or forward in our case, you get an Earth our diameter with continents placed just where they are, with the gaps filled in with molten lava, and then eventually water. So what you end up with is continents that look like this. And along the edges of those continents, a lot of active volcanic activity. We call it the Pacific Rim. We call it subduction. This is a very popular, although waning theory in geology, subduction theory, where one plate goes underneath another one. Solar flares occur and blast several 100,000 miles out into space. The radiation from this takes about 73 hours to travel from the sun to Earth. As it reaches Earth, it's supposed to, it's not going to work. Yeah. That's a really nice video of a solar flare coming to the Earth, going around the Earth and forming charged oxygen particles behind it, showing you how our magnetosphere protects us here on the surface of our world from harmful UV radiation and these cosmic showers that come in from the sun. Right now, these are kind of benign because we are at a solar minimum. It means that we're in between solar cycles. Solar cycle 24, or 23 just ended, and solar cycle 24 just began in February. It's kind of slow starting right now. We've only had a couple of sunspots from it. We've had over 1,000 from solar cycle number 23. We also have evidence in the sea. We have the Ross Gull, which was discovered by James Ross in 1823. He was 23 years old when he made his first trek up there. This gull, as you can see, can fly just like an ordinary seagull, lands on the sea, eats fresh fish, but it has a very strange nesting habit. It flies north in the wintertime. It's not built for 80 below zero. It's not a penguin. It can't stand cold temperatures like that. It comes south in the summer and flies north in the winter. No one, not even the best ornithologists in the world, know where this bird goes in the wintertime. Nobody's ever been there by sea. Wow, that's amazing. Does someone else have one of these out there? I'm going to back up a little bit. Ah, here we go. We also have strange marine life that's showing up. This little guy on the upper left right here is called a frilled shark. It hasn't existed for 1 million years. It was recently netted in Japan. As you can see, it's alive and well. On this lower left side, we have a neon purple frog. Just showed up. No one's ever seen one before. Here we have a squid with a dorsal fin. Also never seen before in our oceans. On the right-hand side here, we have what the Russians called a squeaky alien. That's the way it translates. We don't have it, though, because it was tasty, so they ate it. But we've never seen a fish like that before. And recently, last summer, they did what's called a ray survey, where they go out and capture rays to see if there are any new species evolving. There were over 1,500, including this large one right here, also never seen before. So the question comes, do we have a connection between our oceans and perhaps another ocean that contains this ancient life that's happily minding its own business, swimming along eating plankton, and all of a sudden one day swims through a vent into another ocean and gets netted in our nets? Well, as luck would have it, there's some evidence that might support that. Let's talk about Earth seismology. This is an example of an earthquake that occurs on the surface of our planet. Now, the way geology students treat this now is like this. This is what they see in their textbooks. Every time there's a major earthquake on the Earth, because all of these listening stations are now tied together real time by internet and satellite, we sort of do a CAT scan of the Earth. We get a large vibration on an atoll in the South Pacific. It sends a vibration through the Earth, and we pick it up with geophones on the other side of the planet. Unfortunately, every single time, and this happens well over 1 million times now, we get the waves at the point of impact here, and they go through the planet, but then they sort of curve off, and we get these diffracted waves, these dotted line waves here. And you see this one's got a real creative path right here. We got a vibration here, but we don't know where it came from. Certainly couldn't have gone around the core, because we know the Earth is one big molten mass. So it had to go through the center, so they just draw a dotted line. We believe this is a broken model. There's another one that works a little bit better. This one was put forth by another person of creative thinking. His name is Jan Lambrecht. He took the evidence and worked it backwards to the point of earthquake. And what he came up with was a model that works every single time. And guess what? No shadow zones. Well, as I was saying before, there is evidence to support this. Recently, Washington University, under the direction of Dr. Y. Sessions and some, I'm sure, poorly paid grad students, went through 600,000 seismograms generated by the USGS, and they discovered something really strange. Underneath the Atlantic Ocean, underneath the crust, are the damping waves from another ocean. Well, that got the university really excited. They published some papers on it. They've tried to get some follow-up studies, haven't been able to raise the funding, and we've got them interested in our expedition. These are some other examples of these vibrations and how these energy levels may tie together on our planet. In the upper left, you'll see some infrared photography of the North Pole. It just doesn't match what we would expect our planet to look like if it had a completely molten mantle with tectonic plates floating around on it, a little bit like cornflakes on the surface of milk in your bowl. The ancient Tibetans had a little better idea. As you can see, they've got a mandala down here in the beginning, in the middle of our slide here, that shows how maybe some of these energy fields tie together. And it goes a little bit further than that. We're going to talk a little bit about how planets form. When they form together as an accretion disk, we're just going to use a little Newtonian, a little Einsteinian physics here on a cartoon kind of level, so that you can understand it in the way they would understand it if they were thinking about the problem. And by the way, Edmund Halley in 1629 was one of the first ones to think about hollow earth theory from a scientific point of view. Many scientists followed him. However, the Arctic area is covered with so many meters of ice, nobody could go test the theory. So we asked the question, why don't planets form as hollow balls? Actually, okay, oh boy. Hang on a second. I'm going to back up just a couple slides here, if this right button will work. Okay, here we go. Now, let's see if we can get the animation to work this time. All right, planets form as crusted spheres, actually. As these accretion disks collapse, they don't collapse into solid balls. And the center of gravity actually ends up in the crust. Well, this is a pretty good theory, a pretty good hypothesis. How are you going to back that up? Let's think about it for a second. Suppose that we put an elevator shaft from here in University of New Mexico down into the center of the Earth. and we were to put ourselves on a bathroom scale here in the surface in that elevator and push the down button. And we went down into the center of the earth. What would you suppose your weight would do on the scale? Well, if Newton and Einstein are correct, by the time you get to the center of the earth, all the mass is above you. So it's going to be pulling away from you in all directions. You would actually weigh nothing. Just like you were standing at the North Pole, everywhere you looked would be south. In the center of the earth, everywhere you look is up. So between the centrifugal forces of a rotating planet, the idea that mass, when it collects in one area, is where gravity is building, and the fact that we have a very strong magnetosphere around our planet, it lends evidence to the fact that maybe we have a solid core around which the crust is rotating. Maybe it looks a little bit like this. We have acceleration of 32 feet per second on the surface, and maybe on the inside we have an acceleration of about 21 feet per second. And in the center, we have a molten ball of, the Japanese have recently said, crystalline iron. Very high density, high temperature iron, glowing white hot. Well, that would make enough light to see by. That would make enough light in the right wavelengths to promote photosynthesis. And if you have photosynthesis, you have the basis for all other life. Plant life, bacterial life, and even more complex life forms. If there is a void underneath the crust, between the crust and the core, I can guarantee you there's life there. Life has a way of finding a way to survive, even in the most inhospitable conditions on our planet. So what are we looking for? We're looking for this northwest passage, or a northern passage. It's not right at the North Pole, because we've been right at the North Pole many times, and it's not there. Our historians and legend says it's slightly off of the North Pole, about 4 to 6 degrees. And maybe it looks something like this. One more, there we go. Maybe it looks a little like that. Ocean on the inside, ocean on the outside, with a glowing metal ball in the center. Have you seen this model before? Yes. Thousands of years old, from all over the world. Tibet. We see the symbolism just about everywhere we look. This is a little short video. I don't know if it's going to run or not. No. Okay. I'm actually sitting on top of a college in Lhasa, 12,000 feet in Lhasa, Tibet. Behind me are the Himalayas. And I'm trying to explain why we came to Tibet. Because there was a legend that maybe there was an opening into the inner earth. Maybe the monks knew something about this opening. We found it all over their symbolism, all over their ancient Tibetan Buddhism, going back to the 7th century. And we're going to show you some technology you have never seen before, because the door hasn't been opened since 1959. We'll go to the next slide. There we go. This is in the Lhasa Hotel. If you ever go to Tibet, remember, hotels are not heated. So we went in April. It's rather chilly. This hotel was about 45 degrees. As you can see, that symbolism exists everywhere. You see a star in the center, rays of light coming out, foliage around the outside. It is the central symbol of Tibetan Buddhism. It also exists in other places. The Tibetans have a symbol that looks something like this, and in Rosslyn Chapel, in the ceiling, above the altar, we have almost exactly the same thing carved in stone, and it looks like this. I don't know what happened. I think I went backwards again. I'm pressing the left. We reverse my controls now?
No.
Now we're going forward.
Nah.
All right, here and then here. question also arises, well, gee, if Earth is hollow, Pluto we know is hollow, and no longer belongs to our solar system. Everyone knows planets form as solid balls. Pluto's not a solid ball anymore, so now we only have 8 planets in our solar system, according to the Astronomical Society. But what other planets might be hollow? These are pictures of north polar shots of other planets. This is Saturn's polar hexagon, an energy field that exists in the core of planets just because they rotate, just because they're spinning. We see this in other energy fields too. You're going to be kind of fascinated by some of this. Okay, this is the center of Katrina, hurricane, also a hexagon in the core of it, obviously rotating in a counterclockwise position, or rotation. We also have vortexes in the core of Jupiter, and this is a little animation. You can see a hexagonal shape in the vortex at the pole of Jupiter. Hooray, an animation worked. And we also have Venus's polar depression, which we believe exists on Earth as well. It's a little hard to find from sea, because while you're sailing along, even in a 450-foot-long vessel, you can only see 8 miles. Then the Earth curves away from you. So if you have a curvature that over-rotates down into a depression at the pole, you're not going to see it by sea unless you have a very sophisticated gyroscope that can sense the curvature of the Earth in degrees based on how much latitude or longitude you're traveling. That's the very instrument we intend on taking with us. We also, as you'll see later on in the presentation, have a helicopter on the ship, which will help. This is an X-ray photograph. We couldn't see through the clouds with visible light, so this is an X-ray photograph. And you can clearly see a polar hole sitting in the middle of the Arctic cap. And this is the photograph that turned NASA on its head. While they were photographing the aurora borealis as it exists on Earth, and there are lots of little animated movies that NASA has on its website, they caught one with an aurora over both poles at the same time. Everyone said, no, wait a minute. I thought the aurora borealis was caused by the solar wind striking the planet. And as this cosmic radiation comes in on one side of the planet, it strikes the upper atmosphere, charges up particles, and that's what we see as light. How could it strike both sides of the planet at the same time? So some of the team said, well, maybe it comes from inside the Earth and goes out and interacts with the atmosphere. So they built a set of satellites, which they launched last February. They launched the Themis probes, 5 satellites in one nose cone. As they're orbiting the planet, occasionally they line up all in a straight line, and they try to get measurements if an aurora borealis happens to occur while they're aligned, and they did 3 days ago. They call them plasma bullets. This is their theory after one event. As you can see, the 5 satellites lined up, and between the 4th and 5th satellite, there was a sudden event, a plasma bullet, an explosion of some kind, out of thin air, a magnetic explosion. When that explosion went out, of course, part of it went out into space past the 5th satellite, but the rest of it crossed the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and struck our atmosphere, and guess what? An aurora borealis. Well, they were doing cartwheels down the hall. They have solved the mystery. We now know what causes the aurora borealis. Plasma bullets. Yes, I see just as much understanding on your face as I did. Wait a minute. One string of pearls in space, and what occurred? They say it's caused by the sun. It's sort of leftover, like invisible, you know, like a ball of rubber bands, and then all of a sudden one of the rubber bands snaps. I ask them, don't think like Klingons, okay? There are multiple dimensions. There is energy that's coming into our dimension from other dimensions, sliding in between space-time. And it just happened to slide in between two of your satellites and make itself known. And you caught it on film, or you caught it with your sensors. In fact, have you ever thought about the observation effect? That maybe the scanning of your satellites is what triggered the event. So, lots of good questions to ask, without answers yet. I'm sure there'll be more from the Themis probes. But the point is that NASA spent the money to go find out why, because of that dual aurora borealis picture. And now we're about to spend the money to take a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker to the Arctic Circle to find out from sea level what causes it. So this grid that ties in around the planet, and we see it around all the planets. It's linked into it. It doesn't float around it like our amoebic gravitational force that you see with a wobbling North Pole, magnetic North Pole, or the magnetism of the Earth. This is a locked-in kind of, almost like a ley line grid that lays around the Earth, and it ties into mountains. And I've got some pictures of the Himalayas. It might have flashed right by it. Did it flash right by the Himalayas while I had my back turned?
No.
No? Okay. Well, it looks something like this. As you tie these things together in that shape that you saw around the planets before, you remember the shots around Saturn and Katrina and all of that, this hexagonal form, you begin to pull the points together, and this is the shape that comes out. Does that look familiar? Yeah, it looks really familiar to me too. Of course, that's a two-dimensional version of it. I was over in Tibet, and over there, they don't have Homeland Security. There are no doors on the pilot's cabin. So we're flying in actually it was a 36-seat prop job, actually pretty smooth. No cabin door. And so the steward comes back and says, Dr. Agnew, would you like to come up in the cockpit and film? No. Yes. So I went up in the cockpit, and on my knees I photographed out the front window Everest and K2 and some of these other mountains, and it came out looking like this. So awesome. The pilots get the best windows, believe me. Those windows you have to look out of on the side of the airplane are nothing compared to the front. He's had the most beautiful ultraviolet hue over the entire mountain range. It was unbelievable. I must have taken 100 shots of it. But this is where the power is. This is in Tibetan mythology called the ring of power, the root chakra of the earth. And you have the same thing along the Rockies, the Cascades. You have the Himalayas, the Andes Mountains. And then you have symbolism in all of these religious forms. In the upper left there you see what's called the Merkaba. It is dual tetrahedrons forced into each other. As you know in physics, tetrahedron is the very first shape you get when you go from two-dimensional to three-dimensional physics. It is the most stable single unit in physics. And when you put these units together, all equidistant sides, or same length of sides, same angles, you get a star tetrahedron. It is the energy field of planets. It's the energy field of human bodies, with the spine going right down the center of it. The Tibetans knew about this in the Sri Lanka mandala that you see up at the top, and some more of Roy Young's work here at the bottom. In fact, it's called Gaia-ometry, geometry we call it, relating shapes to the earth. And the Tibetans have it all over their country. In silk, in paper, in sand. They meditate about this shape and its interaction with human consciousness. You can see that they see cycles of energy as it ties into the surface and to the core. And information actually coming out of the core of the earth. And how it ties together in multiple dimensions with us. We as human beings are tied into our planet somehow.
Yes.
In our first book we have an event which the ancients We translated it as the union of the polarity, the combination of higher energy matter and lower energy matter into a binary planet we call Earth. Well, some physicists say, Dr. Agnew, how can we have two forms of matter occupying the same space at the same time? I say, well, it's really not that hard to imagine. You know, a neutrino can travel through a light year of Earth and not hit anything. There's a lot of space in our planet. If I gave you a 5-gallon bucket and told you to fill it full of marbles to the brim where you couldn't get another marble in it, you could still take 2 gallons of water and pour it in the same bucket without overflowing it. Two forms of matter occupying the same container at the same time. When you got up this morning and looked in the mirror, guess what you saw? Well, you saw a pile of calcium and protein and A and water, and you saw another higher energy being inside, occupying the same space, animating this thing of protein and calcium and other minerals and water. Earth is the same way. Earth reacts the same way too. In this building, this is called a mandala building. You'll notice when Tibetan monks meditate on a mandala as they're doing the sand and chanting, they're actually thinking about this right here. 108 rooms. Each one that you meditate through will give you a different aspect of creation. Pay no attention to that guy. I just wanted to give you a perspective of how big the building is. And as you meditate through these rooms, you reach enlightenment. You reach a point of resonance and understanding. In Lhasa, there's a building called the Patala. Up until 100 years ago, it was the tallest building in the world. Inside that building are gold mandala buildings, just like this, scale models of it. And the monks would meditate their way, imagining walking through this little scale model of the building. This is what it looks like up close. This is the little basket at the top. And this is the Patala. This building was begun back in the 6th century. By the time it was finished, it was one of the wonders of the world. People that came to Lhasa at 11,500 feet, when you get off the plane here, you go straight to the hotel because you can't breathe. It's unbelievable. And then we went up from here almost to base camp. But the Chinese have controlled this building since 1959. And there are secret rooms down in the bottom of this building that have had chains on the doors for a long, long time. My guide has been trying his whole life to get into those lower rooms without success until this visit. This is a building in Shigatse. Shigatse is the second largest city in Tibet. It was rebuilt because the Chinese shelled it, even though the Tibetans didn't put up a fight, destroying the graves of the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th Panchen Lamas. Not like it's like a lower office of a Dalai Lama, you have a Panchen Lama. Well, in 1989, the Panchen Lama, reincarnated, decided to rebuild the building and had gained the favor of the Chinese, and he did so. Inside this building was a replica of something we saw in the Patala. I'm going to show it to you, and you're going to be pretty amazed at what you see. Our friend Nikola Tesla used to have dreams, and he would awaken from these dreams and he would begin building his technology. The photons that strike my face right now and go into that film are here because of Nikola Tesla. Make no mistake about it. Thomas Edison was a bystander. But what did Nikola Tesla see, and have others seen it before? Indeed. The stupa. The stupa is like the Egyptian pyramid to the Tibetans. They built it with purpose. There's no precursor. There's no Model 1, Model 2. They just built it. Only they didn't have the technology Tesla did. But it looks like this. 60 feet tall, built out of 4,300 pounds of gold. It has over 10,000 gems on it. And it looks like the replica of a Panchen Lama in the middle of it. Indeed it is. It's a gold cocoon. And around this cocoon is a layer of sapphires, a resonating gem. Coming out of the back of his head are rainbow beams of energy. We see this in Egypt, in Sumeria, in Mayan culture. We see the same energy beams coming out of a human being. What were they doing with a structure that looks like this? Now, keep in mind, this is stylized. I'm going to point some things out to you because I'm about to show you something. You see here a reflecting bowl, and you see here gold stylized electricity maybe with ribbons around it to kind of show that, okay, there's some energy going on here. We don't really know how to do it. We built it in the 7th century, for crying out loud, but this is what we're trying to say. Oh, I hope this animation works. This is the overlay of a Tesla coil onto the stupa. And if I could just get the mouse to go up there and click on that, you'll see the most amazing. I don't think it's going to work. You come to my place later, you'll see it. This Tesla coil forms the same kind of lightning that you saw before, down the sides, and we step it over to the side. That's not going to work. I'm so sorry. That was really a nice animation. The nice thing about this, 60 feet tall, what is it aiming at? Right dead center in the ceiling above it, a 4-dimensional stargate. The Tibetans understood what this energy could do. They just didn't know how to make it work. And then they locked it up, or the Chinese did, from 1959 until I took this photograph in 2006, or 2007, I'm sorry. So Tesla saw the same thing. You know, many are called, but that's what we'd like to think, few are chosen. How about many are called, but few choose? Many are called, but few choose. Some have things that they've learned in their life, maybe lives. And when the right time comes, they put the pieces together and they benefit the world with it. Such was a man like Nikola Tesla. And we see these energy forces working all the time in nature. We don't understand why they work, but we know they work. And let me be a little more clear about that. You know, when you build high-speed manufacturing, you get to deal with a lot of automation, a lot of sensing, a lot of remote sensing, a lot of very extravagant and expensive surface measurement technology. And eventually the question comes up, gee, what is electricity? You know, I've never found anyone that could really answer that question for me. Oh, we know how it works. I asked the question to Dr. Ronald Mallet, inventor of the time machine. Ronald, if I had a wire stretching from the sun to the earth, and on the sun side I had a light switch, and I were to flip it on, how long would it take for the light bulb to light on the earth? He said 8 minutes. I said, no, the light would light instantaneously. Because electricity doesn't work the way you think it works. When we chill down a molecule and look at an electron cloud, we expected to see what Niels Bohr was talking about. We expected to see a 1s, a 2s, a 1p shell with electrons orbiting, behaving themselves mathematically. We didn't see that. What we saw were electrons blinking in and blinking out of existence. Yes, they were along a statistical probability, but they weren't orbiting. They were just flashing in and flashing out of this dimension. Very repeatable, very observable, but also not well understood. The light would light instantaneously, not 8 minutes later. So Nikola Tesla understood this energy. Maybe he was a man before his time. Maybe he introduced technology before commercial barons who said, we can make money doing this. We'll run the electricity down wires, and we'll charge people to hook up to the wires, and we'll be energy barons forever. We'll control the world. And if you look at Earth from space, guess what you see? Society hooked up to those little wires. Flyover countries, dark. But where those wires are, that's where you see the lights, that's where you see the people. And wasn't that the plan all along? Maybe not. Maybe there's more to it. So what did the Tibetan people know? This simple people, by the way, these are nomads. We were going north of Shigatse. We're up about 16,000 feet. These people had come down for the winter to let their goats eat. And they're considered wealthy because they actually own something. They own their goats. Most people do not because of communist Chinese. And why are they so devout? Why are they so happy with what they're doing? Because maybe they know something no one else knows. These are Tibetan nuns. Very, very sweet people. Very understanding of something bright, even in a country that has almost nothing. And this is at 18,000 feet almost. We had to stop here because 4 of our team developed altitude sickness, and our particular leader said, if everybody can't go, no one goes. So we didn't make it to base camp. But the interesting thing that we saw here, beside the high wind and a nice clear view of the Himalayas, were these little piles of stone here and there. And what our guide told us was these were prayer towers. And by the way, they go as far as the eye can see out there. Pilgrims come from all over China, Nepal, and Tibet, India, to the mountains, to here, to say a prayer and stack some stones to lock in their prayer to one of these grids here, so that when they go home, they're sort of plugged into the power of the earth, because they believe that the earth is hollow. And I found in my scientific career that when someone believes something is so, there's usually a root to it. And I am rather ashamed of my colleagues in the sense that although they're very brilliant and as well or better published than anyone, they routinely throw out data. And as we're putting this expedition together, that's one thing we decided not to do. We're not going to throw out any data, even if it comes from religious roots, even if it comes from historical documents, even if it comes from a commercial scientist. So what's the next step in this expedition? We've been to Mount Shasta, we've been to Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, we've been to Tibet. Where is the next step? Where are we going to find the secret behind the dual aurora borealis? Somebody said the name Agartha earlier. This is an ancient hand-drawn map from one of those books. This is the modern map, the modern finger. Pointing to the map, Murmansk, Russia. There happens to be a shipping company there called the Murmansk Shipping Company. They own a nuclear-powered icebreaker. Nice tool. I don't like getting out 14 days away from shore in 2 meters of ice and running out of gas. So, what does the route look like? Starting from Murmansk, heading out to the North Magnetic Pole for a little family reunion. One more time. There we go. Around to New Siberian Islands, down to Northland, and then back to Murmansk. This is a 15-day trek at 12 to 20 knots. Most of it will be crunching ice. This trek, absolutely impossible before 2006. It was covered in at least 6 meters of ice. In 2006, global warming cracked this open. Even diesel-powered icebreakers could make it into the lower part of this region. Now they can't. It's refrozen, and it's having a hard time thawing again in the summertime. But this ship will be able to make it. I'm going to show you a picture of it here in a second. So, as I said, Sir James Ross, 1831, North Magnetic Pole. So in the spirit of exploration, we're going to try to go to the land where the warm wind blows, a land with no horizon. I know I get my mouth going just right here. Just a second. There we go. So this is the ship. When we talk about the Inner Earth expedition, and we don't really call it the Hollow Earth expedition because that would lead people to believe that we actually believe the Earth is hollow. We do not. But we have a hypothesis, and we've developed an experiment, and we've put together a plan for conducting that experiment to prove or disprove whether the Earth is hollow or not. And one thing we know, we can't go to the moon, and we do not have the money or manpower to make it to Mars, but we can, and there's a little bit of audio that goes with this too, we can go to the Arctic Circle. Should be playing. Yes? No audio?
We're checking on that right now.
You can see the helicopter on the back of the ship, 450 feet long, 23,000 tons. And no music. I apologize. Let's see if we can go to the next slide. Have some more angles of this. It's kind of a neat boat. It's not going to be an easy expedition. 13 days, or maybe 8 days of the 15 days crunching ice is not going to be conducive for sleep. And the North Sea is prone to 12-story swells. So if you're prone to seasickness, it wouldn't be for you. 70-mile-an-hour winds across the bow at 20 below zero. I'm not a tropical person, so I'm not worried about it, but some people don't like cold weather.
Trying to see if we can get your audio.
Trying to get my music for me. Nope, it isn't going to play. That's all right. Let's go through to the last slide here. So we're going to do a 5-part documentary. You see 4 parts of it up here because some of this documentary has an Indiana Jones aspect to it. And I don't really talk about it too much in public because we're trying to keep it extra. And the neat thing about these sets of documentaries, they are real science. We have placed a tile, a poster with the Geological Society of America. So we will be soliciting the best geologists in the world to take the greatest expedition in the history of the world to find out if the Earth is hollow or not. We also intended to tie in and discover the secrets behind the Aurora Borealis and what we call planetary core geology. That's pretty cagey, isn't it? That's good. Planetary core geology instead of hollow Earth. And, of course, the effect of the Arctic Circle on human consciousness. Our mission is to build a team with the right skills and the right consciousness in the right place at the right time to discover if the Earth is hollow or not. This is what we're after. And Phoenix Science Foundation is a nonprofit that's working with us, and Advanced Planetary Explorations is the for-profit arm of this that will actually be chartering the ship and taking care of other expenses. I'm the host of X Squared Radio. If you get a chance to listen, it's live 5 to 8 Pacific time at x2-radio.com, and it's on archives 24 hours a day. And I just want you to remember that you are source. Don't ever forget that. Company that I work for is Green Star Products. If you get a chance, check them out. We build biodiesel plants right now, but we've also set several world records with electric cars that still have not been broken, and 100 mile per gallon vehicles as well. So I thank you very much for your patience and for letting me come and present to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. We actually have a few moments for discussion. We can take about 4 or 5 questions, this young fellow right here had his hand up first. So hold your hands up, and I'll give you a number, and we're going to try to take 5 of you, okay?
Spectacular presentation, really beautiful. I enjoyed every minute of it. And I was really intrigued with Rosalind Temple. And the thing that occurred to me, when the Knights Templar were, executed or expunged.
Hold the mic a little closer.
Sorry, when the Knights Templar were purged, there's a lot of theory about the secrets that they might have had. Do you think that some of this information might have been part of the stuff that they were hiding, and perhaps the Vatican has stored away in their archives, that kind of thing?
Yes, the Knights Templar had a lot of secret knowledge that came to them that was already ancient. A lot of people think that the Knights Templar started in England. They didn't. My family was in Freemasons back in the 14th century, which is well before the English ever got involved. And they inherited from someone else in Ireland, and we believe it may even have come from Atlantis. But it held the secrets of transdimensional energy that have been demonstrated by many ancient civilizations, the Mayans and the Egyptians, and I think the Egyptians inherited it themselves. I don't think the Egyptians built the Great Pyramid any more than I think any of you built this university. You didn't build this university, did you? Okay, that's good. And they understood the design of sacred geometry, the use of the golden mean in putting things together, and that very misunderstood word alchemy. We talk about alchemy as turning base metals into gold. And this is what it was twisted into by the medieval kings who tried to make themselves wealthy by taking base metals and turning it into gold. But really, alchemy was about taking something absolutely worthless and making it more valuable than anything else in the world. And they succeeded in doing it. This has all of the Freemason talismans on it, placed here by George Washington, who was a Freemason. And by the way, most of the British officers that fought against us in the Colonial War were also Freemasons and would not fight against the New Jerusalem being formed right here. So that's a little secret of how a little ragtag, poorly financed army could whip the most well-trained, well-financed army in the world in 4 years. Next question.
Yes, sir. Very good talk. One of the things that I've run across in this area is that the nuclear submarines, when they do polar transits, have some rather strange navigation rules that don't fit with the rest of the navigation on the planet. Are you familiar with this?
One of my friends, his name is Kurt Backoven, served on a boomer. I don't know if you know what a boomer is. It's an Ohio-class nuclear-powered submarine. And he couldn't tell me how fast it went. He couldn't tell me how deep it went. But he did tell me he's been under the polar cap 3 times with that nuclear submarine. And yes, they have some very interesting navigational techniques under there. They used to use sound, but it doesn't get them where they need to go. Now they use scalar waves, or these very long wave electrical waves, and they use an instrument called HARP, which is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project on the North Slope of Alaska. What they do is they push the ionosphere out into space and use it as a parabolic mirror, and then they bounce scalar waves off of it to navigate those polar submarines when they do those treks. Yes?
Well, let's assume that for a moment that the Earth was hollow and that at some point in time it had been liquid or maybe loose rubble or something. And now, have you ever done the calculation where if the Earth is hollow and it's spinning, and maybe even the center part spins at a different rate than the surface, at some point the gravitational pull toward the center would be balanced by the centrifugal force of rotating hollow earth. Now, have you ever done those calculations to show what that, what the radius of that hollow earth might be?
Well, based on the density of the crust, which we don't really have that much data, the deepest hole in the world is just a scunch over 40,000 feet being drilled in Russia. That's 5 miles, a 5-mile pinhole we have in the surface of our planet. Based on that density, we think the crust is about 800 miles thick. There's somewhere between a 400 and 500, maybe 600 mile air gap, and then this super dense crystalline iron core. The core has to be very dense, close to the density of uranium, in order to make the mass equation work correctly for the Earth to orbit the sun the distance that it does in the speed that it does. If it's any lighter than that, then the equation doesn't work, and the orbit would have to be substantially shrunk in order to put us mathematically correct.
So this hollow earth model actually has an outer crust and air gap and then a dense inner one. Is that the standard hollow earth model?
If you can call the hollow earth model standard. There is a Coriolis effect that we're beginning to see, and that is that the pole, the actual magnetic alignment of the pole, is wobbling. And a Coriolis effect, as you know, we observe the sun all the time do this. In every solar cycle, the polar alignment of the sun, North Pole and South Pole, swap. And it will do it again, guess when? 2012. The north and south poles of the sun will switch. It's such a regular thing that we take it for granted. Earth has done the same thing and will do it again. And the only way that it could do this is if the core and the crust are disconnected by some kind of air dielectric.
Earlier you said that in the Atlantic, the ocean depth was drilled down and they were able to check for waves, and they found that there was essentially an ocean on the other side of the mantle.
Actually, they didn't drill. What they used were the very seismograms that the USGS has been generating since 1996, just nobody's been correlating it. Washington University, under the direction of Dr. Y. Sessions, cataloged and put all the data from those 600,000 seismograms into the system. And what they found were damping waves of another ocean. In other words, waves crashing on another surface from the inside. And that's what got everybody excited. Now they've tried to follow it up with some Atlantic expeditions, but they haven't been able to raise the funding to go out there. You know, it's 12,000 feet deep.
Where, if there is another ocean on the inside, in what direction, up or down, is it? Do you follow what I mean?
It would be on the inside. If gravity centers in the crust, and the crust is 800 or 900 miles thick, then you've got an ocean on the outside and an ocean on the inside, and you can literally stand on both surfaces. Although when we stand here, we have the gravity of the crust we're standing on, the core, and the crust at the other side of the world pulling on us. So we have an acceleration of 32 feet per second squared.
So we would have an ocean, a crust, an ocean, and an airspace.
And then a core.
And then a core.
Correct.
Thank you.
Those gulls that migrate north, has anybody ever tried putting a beacon on one to see where they go?
They have been trying to do that for over 100 years. I spoke to the world's leading ornithologist, who's an expert on the Ross gull. He says once it gets to about 80 below zero, they turn around and come back. It's not like March of the Penguins, where you have a habitat that you can build at a certain migration point that the penguins come. Although, that's pretty much the plan. And the birds are too small to carry a transmitter, and they can't be tracked once they're at high latitude, because GPS satellites aren't distributed around the poles. They're distributed around the center band of the country, or the world.
Can you explain more about the electric car and 100 miles per gallon vehicle? And the other question is, you work as an engineer for the car manufacturers. Why didn't you guys come up with 100 miles vehicle then and even now?
When the 100-mile per vehicle was created, it was done so as an annual contest. It's an international contest. That year, it took place at Ontario Motor Speedway in Southern California. Every major car manufacturer participated in it. Volkswagen, Toyota, Nissan, Dodge, GM, and Ford, and Green Star. We were invited. We actually we came in first place, not only top speed, but also top mileage, 99.9 miles per gallon. At that time, gas was $1 a gallon. No one was interested in a 100-mile per gallon vehicle. They're interested now. Well, because we can only do one thing at a time, we can't be all things to all people. But yeah, I say the same thing in our board meetings. How come we're not building a factory to build that car again? We still have it in the garage. We'll roll it out and take some pictures of it here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, do you believe that the patents derived by Stan Meyer will come into existence and reality, even with his disappearance?
I'm not familiar with the patents. I do patent research on specific subjects, but I'm not familiar with those patents. I'm really sorry. I wish I could answer the question, but maybe we can get together after this, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
Something occurred to me when you were presenting about the hollow earth that I'm not sure if you've considered, but in the Old Testament, in Genesis, there's a passage which is very mysterious. I don't know it exactly, but it's basically the firmament, which you can consider the crust, dividing between the waters and the waters.
Yeah, it's actually the second step of creation in Genesis chapter 2, where it says, "And the Spirit of the Lord moved across the face of the deep and divided the waters from the waters. And God placed a firmament between the waters, and God saw that it was good and called it the second day." That's actually what it says. And when you think about that, you say, gee, wait a minute. I have a water planet. Spirit of the Lord moves upon it and divides the waters from the waters. Sounds like a cell dividing to me. And then a firmament put between the two. That's one way of looking at it. The other is maybe you have a water planet and you form a crust with an ocean on top and an ocean underneath. There are two ways of looking at it. Then when you go a little bit further forward to about 4800 BC and see Noah ostensibly writing a record of how the fountains of the earth opened up and a sea came out and filled up everything. And this boat, which was sitting on sand and everyone was laughing at me, now floats. And for 7 months it floats until it lands on Mount Ararat. Interesting observation.
The knowledge that you've, that's demonstrated in the symbolism of the art that you've taken pictures of as buildings and all, is that in any way associated with our pineal gland?
Yes, it is associated with the pineal gland. Anciently, they think that before we evolved into the being that we are now, and it's highly suspect that we did that on our own, the pineal gland was our main gland for communicating. We didn't really vibrate air across muscles in our throat and make words. We used telepathy of some kind, and we still use telepathy. If you don't believe that, ask your wife sometime. Yes.
Okay, we have time for about two more here, and I've got two right here, 1 and 2.
Okay, when you were showing what your plan is for the actual expedition, and you were going around, like, you don't exactly expect to find like a hole or anything. What is it exactly that you're looking for?
What we're looking for primarily is this event called an oceanic depression. Many Russian ocean captains have talked about times when they couldn't see another ship on the horizon when they should be able to see it. They drop out of visual range. They talk about this oceanic depression, where sea level isn't sea level anymore. They sail over a kind of ridge into a valley in the ocean, losing sight of their cohorts, which are just a short distance away. Now, they can't sail everywhere, and history is full of wooden ships that got locked into ice by sailing too far north and not realizing that when the poles begin to freeze again, they do so at about 40 to 50,000 acres a day. You just can't sail away from it fast enough. And they get locked in the snow and they freeze to death.
You mentioned alchemy a little bit earlier in the presentation. In the book, The Cross at Hendaye by Fulcanelli, in association with the Mystery of the Cathedrals, he shows all of the same diagrams that you have shown in the Tibetan monasteries. But he also actually mentions an opening into the Earth's core in Peru. So does that fit with your that geometrical model that you showed earlier today?
Yes, it does. The Andes and the mountains along the Peruvian area, especially Machu Picchu, are also locked into this grid. And that's one place we haven't been. I want to go. Maybe we can plan a trip between here and Peru between now and the time we go to the North Pole, just so we gather all the data. And by the way, on the expedition, we will be broadcasting live via satellite uplink. 4 different cameras will be switching between. So while we're on the expedition, you can watch what's going on the ship. And we'll also be shooting 3,000 hours of film.
Yeah, hi. When I was a kid growing up in Calistoga, there was a man who had went on the Admiral Byrd's tours and on his expeditions. His name was Mr. Gosha, and you can probably find that he was one of the survivors of it. And as a kid, I used to go there and listen to him and some of the stories and the things they went through. And on one time, I had told him about me seeing spacecraft on Mount Santa Helena. And he told me they've been around forever. They're in the earth. They're in the heavens. Don't worry about them. And he told me that they have seen them on that expedition, and they may even have a base in the earth. So, Mr.
One of the
Gosha, look him up. He was on there.
Well, I was going to say, one of the pieces of data that we get on a very regular basis, and sometimes a prolific basis, is data from channelers. And we try to stay open-minded about it. I'm certainly not discounting it. We record it all. We respect it all. I'm not a scientist that's going to throw out downloads. Tesla had them. I've had them. Some of you have had them. And they're undeniable. Whether we can share all that with the public at this time, I don't know. But I recently told another talk show host during an interview, I'm looking for a maple leaf, a rock, a bone, anything from the inner earth. We have a trail that's showing up in our oceans, in our atmosphere, and it's leading to one place. We're going to follow that trail with the only ship on Earth that can make the trek. And we'll just bring back the data and we'll see. That's what it's all about. We're just exploring.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for Dr. Brooks Agnew and an incredible presentation. Thank you. Okay, tomorrow morning, bright and early at 8 a.m. in the alternate venue. It's just around through the open area there. It's a round building just directly across. We'll try to have some signs there.